Great.
Okay, we're back live.
Let's see if oh, yay, I can look at them over here. All right, let me pause that. Oh, it's only going to be the ones that haven't been answered, that have been answered. Oh, wait, answered questions. Oh, yay, I can look at the questions over here. Yay.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so we're live again. Sorry, guys. I've never had that before, that I just happened to look up and it said that it was off air. That's so weird. So I am not going to be able to look at both screens at this. Oh wait, I can look at both screens. I'm on my little baby laptop, so like that is not the right thing. Let's see. Nope, that's not it either. There it is. It's like I knew I'll find the tab sooner or later. Okay. All right, so the next question is, okay, so how hard was it to create the world that these teens lived in?
It was hard, but it was fun. It's really cool when you write dystopian. You know, it depends like how far in the future do you go? You know, like do you write, like I have friends who are like science fiction writers who write like hundreds of years in the future. And so the idea of writing something like 30 years in the future was great because it's like, well, in some ways it's really familiar because like they're in this town and they're walking by a Starbucks and there's a Home Depot and, you know, there's stuff that you know. I mean, you know, they're all wearing like stuff from Banana Republic and they're all wearing sunglasses. So that's like really familiar. But the idea of what really interested us, the idea of a world where if it's just kids and you only live to be like 19 years old, basically you'd probably stop, you know, like most people would stop reading, you know. It's like if you don't have like, if you have kids when you're like 15, 16 years old, but you don't really live to see them grow up, you're not going to take care of them the way a parent would, like, you know, when we think of parenting. So you're not going to know stuff. And if you're not reading, you become really just ignorant. You know, you just don't know stuff, even really basic stuff. So that was sort of an interesting thing. Like if you have a world of children where nobody knows anything. So that was sort of like, well, extrapolate that. How does that work? Like, how do they deal with each other? How do they deal with, you know, danger or fear? How do they like express themselves? How do they plan? How do they, you know, work together? It was like, it becomes sort of almost becomes more like a psychological thing about like trying to figure that out. And that sort of affects everything. But then you were thinking, yeah, sure, like physically, what would happen to a town if 30 years went by and there was absolutely no maintenance? Like there's no electricity, there was no, so how would things fall apart? And, you know, how would you stay alive? Like the idea that they all live off food that are like in a Costco. You know, we had to do research on like what food can you still eat after 30 years? And it's interesting.
Twinkies.
We do have there's one moment where they find a box of Twinkies and they're like really hard, but they're not rotted. And they're thinking, well, okay, we're not going to die eating these, so we're going to eat these. And we don't call them Twinkies.
Well, they said that Twinkies, technically, if the plastic doesn't die, they will last for 20 years. So
Yes. So we don't call them Twinkies because we didn't want to get hostess mad at us, but it's like the description is sort of, it's clearly Twinkies. But you know, you can eat honey for like hundreds of years.
As long as it doesn't completely sugarize.
Yes.
Which then you can just, if you still have it and you don't want to waste it, if you just boil it, it'll dissolve all that sugar.
See, you would do well in a dystopian world.
I've read enough of them. Well, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, you constantly ask when you watch horror movies. You know, didn't these people watch TV?
Exactly.
You know not to go down the deep, dark, creepy tunnel. Go the other way.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So then there's the question. If you wanted to have used the physical Twinkie hostess name, what would you have had to do to be able to do that?
You really couldn't because your editor would circle it and say, do not use. And you would write back and say, no, come on, it's funny. And she would write back and say, no, we're going to get a lawsuit and no, you cannot use it. And you'd say, and then that would be that. I mean, the same thing is true. The same thing is true, like, you know, because I also write a lot of television and you can't mention products. You just can't. You know?
Well, what about something like Disney World or something?
you really can't, you just can't really mention anything, because everything has to get approved by the legal department. So the rule of thumb is like, don't mention anything. Don't mention anything recognizable.
Okay. Right. The next question is, what is the best advice that you have ever gotten?
The best advice I ever got, and it's true no matter what you want to do or what your passion is, the best advice was, I was really broke, and I was probably like in my late 20s. Someone said to me, if you really want to be a writer, you should just quit your job for 6 months, or just do writing for 6 months and just give it a shot, because you may hate it, you may realize that this is ridiculous and you're not good at it, you don't want to do it, but or you may love it and you may actually write something good. But the thing is, otherwise you're going to spend the rest, if you don't do it, you're going to spend the rest of your life thinking, oh, if only I had done it. And he said it's worse to never have tried doing something than at least to have tried it. And I thought, and at the time I was thinking, well, this is really, 3 months in, I'm like, I'm totally broke and I'm like desperate and I haven't written anything and this is a nightmare. But it was actually really good advice, and I'm really glad that person told me that.
Right. The next question is, who is your favorite character in the Wasteland trilogy?
Wow. The one I love the most is Esther, because she's like kind of flawed, but she's really great. But, so I guess she's number one, but really close number two is her friend Scar, because Scar is just very, she's, the variants are really interesting because they're born sexual mutants. So they're sort of really purely androgynous, and they have their own like sort of little society, and you decide your own gender when you're 10 years old. And so she's decided to be a girl. So she and Esther are best friends. And so it's like the two of them together are just like, they're like friends in a way that, I think is just fantastic. So I'd say maybe I'm going to cheat on that question, say just the two of them together are my favorite characters.
Right. The next question is, so out of Esther and Scar, if your book was changed into a movie, who would play those two main characters?
Wow. Well, that's interesting. I would say, and Laurence is so much better at movie stuff than I am. He would know immediately. I would say, well, we really liked, just because she's a really good actress. I mean, she doesn't really look right, but Kiernan Shipka is a good actress, and she would be actually really good as Esther. Although the look of Esther is someone who's much more, actually more like you, like sort of dark hair, dark, just like, just sort of, we wanted her to sort of very distinct like look that, we wanted for her. It's like sort of straight dark hair pulled back. And as for Scar is really interesting because, that's a hard one, because Scar is like, whoever it is would need like a fair amount of like makeup, because the variants are also like kind of like, they almost look a little bit like they have Down syndrome, although they're like incredible warriors. So it's an interest. I had to think about that some more, but she's like a really fierce warrior, but she's also sort of like a goofy girl. So she's both fierce warrior and goofy girl. So I'd have to think about that, but yeah, I don't know.
The next question is, what character changed the most during the course of the series?
Wow. I would say definitely there's this character named Eli. And Eli at first is sort of this like, he's in the really early on in the first book, you meet him. He's a really nice guy. He's not really smart, and he's not really, he's kind of a nice guy, but I mean, he really has a big crush on Esther. But he's kind of, I wouldn't say a schlub. He's not very exciting. And so, but he always, and so like an Esther is sort of like this really dynamic person, and she falls in love with she falls in love with Caleb in the first book, which really breaks Eli's heart. And then in the second book, he's one of the people who helps escape, with her. They have a little group of people who escaped to Montreal, and he's one of them. And again, there are a couple of times when she is interested in different people. She's never interested in him, and he gets increasingly bitter And then finally in the third book, the bad guy in the third book is this really charismatic young guy named Gideon, who's really ruthless and really cold and really sort of a genius. He's really scary at power. And Eli, because he feels like he's been so abandoned by Esther, basically turns his allegiance to Gideon and sort of becomes his number two guy. And he has to do something really terrible, which is against his nature because he's essentially a good person. But he feels he has to do it because he really respects Gideon. So he ends up doing this terrible thing, which is like a really soul-killing thing that he does. But because he's essentially sort of a weak person and a good person, it destroys him. And he starts, there's this, they find alcohol in this world, except they call it proof. So he finds proof and he becomes really just so haunted by this terrible thing he's done that he starts really trying to obliterate that memory, and he becomes extremely self-destructive. So he has this, but at the end, he actually does an extremely heroic thing. So he has a huge arc. He goes from being a kind of a nice guy to being an increasingly dark person who becomes actually kind of evil, and then he sort of redeems himself. It's a huge difference.
The next question is, how did you guys co-write this series? How did you split up the work?
It was both really fun and really difficult. We had written a couple of graphic novels together, and that was easier because those are basically like screenplays, which are they're just easier to write together because a lot of it's structural, and you just basically talk through the story, and then that's basically, someone writes it up and the other person rewrites it, and that's done. Writing prose is much more personal, it's like, because there's a lot of words. So what we would do is we both really believe in structure. So writing a single book, you'd be given roughly a year to write the book. We would spend probably the first 5 months just talking about the structure and just spending a lot of time talking and talking and talking and talking and arguing and arguing and arguing. And we would go on long walks. We both live in New York, we live in New York City, and we would take really long walks and just talk about, okay, so they arrive at this place. It's called the source. What about this? What if there's a really terrifying person there? Well, who is that person? Well, it can't be a young guy. Well, why not can't it be a young guy? Well, what if it's an older person? Well, there's no older people in this world. And so then we would just argue and argue and argue, and we'd come up with the basic outline of the story. And then we would start breaking that down even further, and we'd be writing it at night and like sort of adding to this gigantic document until we finally had this gigantic, crazy outline. And then we started breaking it down into acts. Roughly, these novels are 3 acts, roughly. And then we would start breaking the acts into scenes, and then the scenes into beats. And then we would just split up the work. It's like, okay, I'm going to take, act 1, scene 2, whatever, beat 4, and write a first draft, and he would write the next one, and then we would do that for like 5 or 6 days, and then we would email each other our work, and then we would read it, and then we would fight, and then we would go on to the next section, and then we started rewriting each other's stuff. We'd hand each other sections, and then we would rewrite each other's work, and then switch it back, and then we would rewrite it again. So ultimately, by the time it was all over, I'd say these books were rewritten more than most books get rewritten, because there were 2 of us, and we were constantly like, you took out my best scene, and like, oh, so there was a lot of that, and we fought a lot. But then we would also, because when you're married, you have to make up, so we would always make up.
So how long, like in all, did it take you to write the book?
Each book took, because it's also like, it's the schedule that the publisher gives you. Mm-hmm. Each book took us about a year each to write. But when I say a year, that's probably, that was also, I write in television. So like I have like a day job. So it was just grabbing a minimum of 4 hours a day, either first thing in the morning, throughout the day at work. I would bring in a thumb drive. Don't tell my old employers. Or I would do it at night, and like Laurence would also do work during the day, and then we would just switch. So it would be like, and on the weekends we would just spend like 12 hours a day writing. So it was a heavy. So it was like 24/7 for about a year each book.
Oh wow! All right.
Yeah.
So the next question is: explain your book in 5 words.
Wow. Well, that's impossible.
They don't have to relate to each other. They can be,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Dystopia, heroine, conflict, despair, triumph. That's really corny. That's really dorky.
Do you have anything new in the works?
New in the works? Well, funnily enough, I'm actually working on. It's not a book. I'm working on a TV series for Nickelodeon as the story editor. So that's, I think, the next new thing I have going on, which is it's an animated series called Welcome to the Wane, which is totally different from Wasteland. But I also write short stories, and I have a bunch that are submitted right now. So I'm like in between, like working on a big project like a book and also working on a series, which is also a big project. I try to do smaller work. And Laurence and I are also trying to work on some ideas for new books. So we're doing that. So trying to juggle all these things at once.
All right. The next question is, out of the 3 books, which one's cover is your favorite?
Oh, wow. I love the covers. The covers are really lovely, aren't they? I think they did just a terrific job.
I like the 3rd one.
I kind of like the 3rd one too. And it's really interesting the way they use color and the way they use light. And interesting, there's green, and it's really smart the way they did these covers. The first one is really sort of like, the yellow is almost like it's sick. It's like pollution, and it's really, really dark. And there's something spooky and hopeful about the second. But the 3rd one, the green, there's hopefulness in the 3rd book. And there's also the whole notion of sort of growing things and something like the earth reviving itself after all this terrible stuff that's happened. That's very much a part of the 3rd book. So even though it's like really messed up and it's clearly a dark and scary world, there's still, like, you can tell that there's something good that's going to happen out of it. So I think the 3rd cover, I agree with you. I really like it. Plus it's pretty. You know?
It is. It's like the first one, I always thought that it would remind me of like Resident Evil. And then the second one reminds me of like things like Terminator.
Yeah.
And then like the 3rd one almost looks like fantasy.
Yeah, it does.
You have a dragon in the background, and it would be like perfect for fantasy.
No, you're right. That's so interesting. You're right. That's really observant of you.
Like the building in the back, you could like switch that to a dragon. It would still look just fine. It's so weird.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a really smart way of looking at it. No, but at the same time, they all work together.
They do.
And it's kind of neat when you line them up on the shelf. It's like the colors sort of work together. They're really, the jacket designers they're such cool people. They're so creative, and it's always interesting to see like the different possibilities they go through. Originally, like even on the first book, the original Esther, she had blonde hair, and it's like what I was telling you. Like I said, her coloring's more like your coloring. So we said, like let's change her hair, like so it's darker. But they're really cool. Like so they take little notes like that, but they read the book and they take all the little clues from the book and they want to hear what you have to say. Like in the second book, they create these sort of wagons out of bicycles, and they wanted to know what that looked like. So I actually drew one on a piece of paper and I just emailed it to them, and so they sort of use that. So they're really cool people, really cool department.
Great. All right. And the last question of today is, what Hogwarts house do you belong to? And for Esther and Scar, what houses would they belong to?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't really hear you. You're breaking up.
What Hogwarts house do you belong to?
Oh my God.
And Esther and Scar, what houses would they belong to if they were sorted into them?
Oh my God, that's like an impossible question.
We get a lot of Harry Potter questions. I don't know why.
Oh yeah, wow. I can't. I'm like frozen. It's also like I'm embarrassed to say it's like I haven't read the Harry Potter books in a really long time, and it's like my mind is freezing again. I'm sorry. I'm like that's a terrible thing to not be prepared for a good question like that. It's again, it's one of those I'm not good at the thinking fast on my feet thing. Oh, I'm
I
really
know that
sorry.
feeling for today anyway.
Yeah. It's also funny. It's like, oh my God, Harry Potter out of left field. It's like, oh my gosh. And then I'm going to be thinking of the answer later. I'm sorry.
That's all right. All right, and then back to one of our first questions. Have you figured out what your favorite young adult novel is?
Oh, okay. I mean, these are a little younger than young adult, but I'm just gonna but I just love them as a trilogy. I love The Golden Compass. You know, I think
haven't
that's
read those yet.
they're really cool. They're really wild. They're so crazy. You know, they're so trippy. I remember they sort of came out around the same time as Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like Harry Potter is amazing, and then I read like Golden Compass. And it's like, whoa, this is trippy. It's like really, it's like it's interesting read if you read it at the same time as reading Harry Potter, because there's something really. I mean, it seems to be just like kids and fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually a lot deeper than that. And actually, the author Philip Pullman got in a lot of trouble because people thought that his books were anti-God
Mm-hmm.
and anti-Christianity and stuff. And so it was very controversial at the time. But the level of fantasy and the rules of his world are so interesting because it's also excuse me, I've got this terrible cold. The rules of his world are interesting because it's sort of a recognizable world in that it takes place in England and it takes place at Oxford University. But it's at the same time, there's this totally crazy cosmology going on at the same time that's very different. And it's really weird. It's not what you would expect, you know. They're very trippy, you know. So that just pops into my mind.
I've seen the movie. The movie was awesome.
Yeah. The movie doesn't really deliver what the books do.
They never do.
Yeah. I know. Has there ever been a movie that's better than the book?
The Scorch Trials that just came out. I actually really liked what they did with the movie versus the book.
Uh-huh.
They changed everything.
Yeah.
But I really like what they did with it. They did a really amazing job.
Yeah. But that's funny. You said they changed everything.
They did. They kept like I think the characters' names, the characters themselves, and I think like one location.
Yeah.
Everything else has changed.
Oh my gosh. That's like
crazy.
Like the author's nightmare.
I don't know. But yeah. But they did a really good job with it.
Yeah.
So would you like to do a shout out to anybody? And
Wow.
we are done.
A shout out, I guess, to my, this is a shout out to my nieces and to readers everywhere. Everyone who adores reading. But my nieces, Evelyn, Catherine, Melody, and Maple, who were all like fierce and awesome girls and big readers, and they're going to grow up and be awesome heroines when they get older. So that's to them.
Right, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
If you ever would like to come back, just let me know.
Okay, thank you, and maybe I wouldn't have a cold next time.
All right, you can just click out.
Okay, thanks so much, Jessica.
No problem.
Great talking with you. Bye.
Bye-bye. And everybody, that was Susan Kim, and these are the 3 books that you can win. They are not currently signed. It is 2 paperbacks and a hardback. And just so you guys know, the next show that we will be having once I get back over to my list of shows, Crossroads, we are going to be starting a couple of things via BookTube, and one of those will 2 of those will be on October 25th. Both of them are on Sunday. One is at 10 a.m., one is at noon, both Eastern Standard Time. For the fact, Sundays is normally the time that I'm gone at Disney or, you know, whatever park we're going to that year with my family. But one of my bloggers that as I had said before, she is no longer available on Saturday because she is working. So we had to move it around. So now they're extremely early on Sunday. So if you guys have any questions for those, if you can't tune in because I know the time changes suck, you guys can always just post to the actual event. First one at 10 a.m. on the 25th Sunday will be the A to Z Bookish survey tag, which I have seen floating around earlier this year, and we thought that we would hop on to the Bookish survey tag train and try it out. And then at noon, we're going to be doing the November TBR list, which is basically just going to be a list of all the books that we hope to get through during November. And it's a doozy because we're still doing 14 books, but now it's split up between the three of us. So hopefully it'll be a little bit easier. The next show won't be until Sunday, November 1st, and that will be our talk about the 10th anniversary of the Twilight Edition and Midnight Sun. So that one's going to be going on at 11 a.m. And then at noon, we will be doing our monthly book haul, which, as you can see, let me move back over here, is slowly growing because there's all of that right this second. So, and I've got more stuff coming next week. So more than likely it will be full. Really, really full. Also going on in November 7th, we will be having a half week of nothing but Sherry Ficklin books because she's amazing and awesome, and I actually haven't read everything from her. So she will be joining us on November 7th at 4 p.m. That one is on a Saturday. For Queen of Always, it is the last book in the Queen of Someday series. I actually don't think that's actually the series name, but I'm not going to look it up right this second. But I cannot wait to finish that series. It's amazing. If you haven't read it, definitely check it out. Book 1, I think, is free on Amazon, and it is Queen of Someday. Then also the following the 2 Saturdays after that, I think, Saturday, November 28th at 4 p.m., we will be talking with Kathy Lynn Cross. She has an upcoming book called So I think it's So Shall I Reap. I can't read it all that well. It's some itty bitty. She'll be coming on as well as doing our November monthly book haul. And then November 29th, which nobody is coming on, there are no special people, will be our November wrap up. And then December 6th will be our House of Night series review, because during November we are going to be reading the entire 15 books in the House of Night series, as well as the novellas. I think I added that into that, and the House of Night handbook, the Fletching handbook, and the comics that have been released and all that jazz. So we're going to be doing all of that stuff. And if you look over here, you can see my new little friends here. This little black kitty is from Kiki's delivery service. I think you pronounce his name as Gigi. Not actually sure on that. And then this is one of the little, Pusheen cats. My daughter keeps calling him a zombie cat because he's green. So can't say anything to that. And if you guys want to know what I'm reading right now is this will actually be up for giveaway later next week. I have to read it first. And now I'm going to get off of here and go get ready to eat some food because I've been cleaning all day and I need a shower and maybe some fresh air because I've been inhaling all these paint fumes because we decided to paint some baseboards and bleach. Lots of cleaning bleach. So I am out of here. If you guys have any extra questions to the author, just toss them in the event, either one of them. I don't know why it bumped us off air. It was really weird. I've never had that happen before. And I will catch you guys later.